I know that there are people out there who believe that abortion is just ridding the body of a clump of cells. You'll forgive me for saying so, but as far as I'm concerned, that perspective on life is just wrong. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk today on the idea of adoption versus abortion. Because in my opinion, when that clump of cells begins to form very, very quickly, it's very obvious that what you're dealing with is a human life. It is the beginnings of human life. I wanted to talk, as I say, today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. By the way, I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and it is Monday, the 21st of June of 2021. Welcome on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, wherever you happen to be visiting me from. I wanted to talk today about this idea of adoption versus abortion and why it's so important to choose one path, in my opinion, over the other. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read my notes real quick so that you have an idea where I'm starting from. Notes today were really simple. I said, so you really can't imagine any difference between a 16-year-old who wants to adopt a child and the same person not being allowed to abort a living being. In one instance, the child wants to adopt somebody for whom they likely cannot care. In the second, the child is actively killing a baby who could typically easily be adopted. What kind of world are we in where people can't understand the distinction? This is sort of what drove the beginnings of my subject for today. Now, there's more that I want to talk about. One example is, you talk about a kid being either in a home with a parent who's really not qualified to bring them up, which, by the way, most of us weren't when we started bringing up children. I was 20, 21 at the time, and I promise you, no, not 2021, not the year, 20 or 21 years old, maybe even a little tiny bit younger, no younger than 19, but probably more like 20 by the time my first child, or 21 by the time my first child was born. In fact, I can say pretty categorically, I must have been, let's see, so anyway, the point I'm making, I would have been 21. So the point that I'm making is this, the simple point that I'm making is this. There's a difference between a child who I grant you shouldn't be bearing children at all, having that child who somebody else may help them struggle through caring for, or who they may give up to adoption or to an orphanage or whatever. These days orphanages aren't much of a thing most of the time. It's foster home as opposed to an actual orphanage, which sometimes is a good thing and sometimes is a bad thing, right? But the thing is, typically speaking, even if there are not people who will bring that child, who will adopt that child, there are people who will bring that child up. And sometimes that's not a great thing. But I have to ask you a question. If you had the choice between me putting a bullet in your brain right now, or you finding yourself in difficult circumstances, or if you'd had a choice as a teenager, what choice would you have taken? Now, I know that there are some people who would have answered that with the I'd have rather died. Okay, but here's the thing. If you can get past whatever struggles, whatever difficulty you're dealing with, you can come to a place in life, oftentimes, that's so substantially better than the one that you were born or even early on raised into, that it's very hard to imagine that your childhood was what it was. It doesn't take a genius to figure this stuff out. Now, of course, it's also true that as an adult, you may find yourself in a far worse situation, at least for a time, if not all the way along the line, or at least as bad a situation than the one that you were in as a child. You never really know what's going to happen. I can give you some pointers to make it so that you find yourself in better circumstances. Behave like an adult when you get to be one. Go to work. Don't get pregnant until you're in a committed, preferably marital relationship. Finish at least high school. Okay? Don't take on debt to go to school, as a rule. Don't do it. To follow this course, and the chances are you're going to end up with a relatively happy childhood / young adulthood. Now, it's obviously fair to say that there are people who suffer mental, psychological, emotional trauma, spiritual trauma as children, and that those people will need special care. That's certainly true. But the thing is, whether or not they ever get it, the possibility exists that they will. And the one thing that I've learned about life is life turns on a dime. So getting back to the sort of original concept, look, if you are, say, 16 years old and you got pregnant, I'm sorry that you did that. But the first thing you need to realize, and I know that maybe this wasn't explained to you very well at the time, the first thing that you need to realize is you got into that situation because you were having sexual relations with someone and should not have been. It's that simple. Unless you're going to tell me that you've dealt with immaculate conception, something I'm not really buying. That happened once. I don't think it's going to happen again. But unless you're telling me that you're dealing with immaculate conception, the reason you ended up with child is because you were involved in relationships that you should not have been involved in. It just doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Now that you're there, be woman enough, and by the way, if you're the man that got that young woman into the state she's in, or helped her to get into that state, you be man enough to live up to your mistakes instead of just trying to kill off an innocent baby. And if you need to, there's adoption and there's foster homes and so forth that can take care of a child until that child is in a state where they can be taken care of. But the truth is, if you put yourself in that situation, don't blame me if I tell you tough it out. At 21, I was raising children. That's been, 36 years ago now. Okay? It's been that long ago that I've had to deal with children. And I will acknowledge that where I didn't exactly think to myself, I'd really like to have children, the idea of having children was not anything like repugnant to me. It was something that I actually thought, yeah, that'd be okay. Now, I was kind of dumb about that, and I'll be the first to admit and acknowledge that. And I got into a relationship with somebody I shouldn't have got into the relationship with. But that's not the kid's fault. They didn't do it. And if I had my way, I didn't, for multiple reasons, many of them my fault, to raise my children, I would have done so. I have an 8-year-old right now I'm raising basically alone. Look, it's okay. It's not easy. It's not easy. And he's autistic. He's moderately autistic to make things more interesting. And I'm not trying to make myself look like some sort of saint or martyr or something. I'm just telling you what my circumstances are. And let me just tell you something. I was thinking just this morning what a wonderful kid he is. What a gift of God that child is. And this is, to me, how people dealing with that should be doing it. But look, if you're 16 and you feel like you can't raise your child, which I hate to tell you this, but I have a very hard time having sympathy for you unless you led a very sheltered life, because you knew that having sex could result in pregnancy, right? But if you're 16 and you feel like you can't raise that child, I pretty much bet you there are people out there who will do that. And if there aren't right this minute, if that child goes into foster care for a time, I'm going to bet you that there will be people over the course of time that will take that child in, and maybe they'll get the best situation and maybe they won't. But guess what? That's true for any kid. Your kid is not the only one that's in that boat. So that's my attitude about this. And as far as it goes, you should know that there are many of us out there who consider children, who, fetuses, whatever you want to call them, we consider them babies. They are children. And for you to abort that means that, you're taking an innocent life. That's pretty much, and if you can't see the difference between somebody who's 16 wanting to adopt a child when they're probably not ready, and somebody who's 16 wanting to abort a child when they're probably not ready, then you probably have other problems to deal with. I'm just saying. Okay, now I need to go ahead and wrap this up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Monday, the 21st of June of 2021. It means tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 22nd of June of 2021. Thanks for everybody who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Remember that you can give me a positive Rumble or a negative one on Rumble. You can give me a like or a dislike, a thumbs up or thumbs down on YouTube. You can comment on either of those platforms. The subject for today has been adoption versus abortion, and tomorrow's subject is going to be one that is going to sound really bad, but when we talk about it, you'll see that it's not what it appears to be, and it is Arbeit macht frei, which is the German for work makes free, makes you free, basically. And it was the first thing I'll say that I will say today is it was badly used in the time that it was used. They did all kinds of improper things with it, so I'm not trying to defend the term. It's the term in the way that it was used by the Nazis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As I say, I hope you're having a good day today. Today is Monday, the first day of that work week for many of us. Hope things are going well for you, and hopefully we will see you on tomorrow's Daily Summation. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Monday, the 21st of June, 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.